Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of our NEC Economic Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure to have with us Reka Horvath, Head of Unit in the European Commission's Recovery and Resilience Task Force, responsible, among others, for the technical work for the Recovery and Resilience Plan of Portugal. And today, we will discuss the Recovery and Resilience Plans in Portugal. Being one of the most challenging parts after the impact of COVID, we want to explore this topic and understand its mechanism better. Welcome, Reka, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Alberto. Hi, everyone who is listening. Many thanks for asking me for this conversation.
All right, thank you, Reka. Let's start with some soft questions to know more about you before diving into the topic of the day. Can you share a bit about your background and journey that led you to this position in the European Commission? Which countries are you following specifically in the RRP task force?
Yes. So I am, and it's that's why I'm quite happy that you are doing this podcast with me, because you are also an economic student. So I am an economist by trade. I have a PhD from the Autonomous University of Barcelona and the University College London. And by trade, I am a competition regulatory economist. So after the PhD, I worked many years in this field. So competition and regulation, mostly in telecoms. And I worked in private practice as an economic consultant, but I also worked for telecommunications regulators, like, for example, for ANACOM in Portugal or Ofcom in the UK. And when I joined the European Commission, I also joined in DG competition. So the part of the Commission which is responsible for competition policy. But then when in 2020 COVID hit, everything turned around, not also for me, because what happened is that I have been asked to join the Recovery and Resilience Task Force, which was a new part within the European Commission, tasked with the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And since I spoke Portuguese, I suppose that's why I was asked to work on the Recovery and Resilience Plan of Portugal. And then when we started, I was also responsible for the Recovery and Resilience Plans of Austria, Germany, and Malta. Then later on, it just stayed with Malta and Portugal. And then I added Ireland to the mix later on.
Thank you. Really, really interesting. And thank you for this big overview of your career. Really interesting also your experience here in Portugal, as many of our followers are Portuguese students, and this is really nice. So you have had a previous contact with Portugal as well as a lecturer at Católica University. Please correct me. How would you describe such an experience as an academic in Portugal?
Yeah, so I lived in Portugal in the 2000s for a few years. And while I was living there, I was asked to teach a course at Católica. It was about industrial economics, regulation, competition policy. And I very much enjoyed this experience because the students were excellent. The classes were quite lively. So students were asking questions. We had a very open discussion. I also quite enjoyed discussions with the faculty at Católica. So all in all, I found this a very good experience. And what I found very interesting at the time, that students were really interested in my real life experience with competition policy and regulation. So we discussed the cases I worked on and the ones I was following in telecommunications, but also outside this field.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is one of the best thing about having a lecturer with experience, because like for students, we really want to know like what is also the field job in many occasions. So yeah, thank you. Okay, let's now move to the central topic, the recovery and resilience plans, and let's briefly introduce our followers to this topic. How would you synthesize a huge mechanism like the recovery and resilience plans that has been leading the news for a long time and discussed for many months and years now?
Well, so the Recovery and Resilience Facility was set up in 2020 as a response to the COVID pandemic. And the whole point of this facility is to transform our economies and societies to make them more resilient for future crises as well, but also to help EU countries along the green and digital transitions that need to happen uh, these days. And the Recovery and Resilience Facility, so it was set up more or less with an allocation of 800 billion euros, which is a lot of money. In the end, in 2022 prices, we are around 650 billion euros that will be disbursed. So this is the amount, the envelope that has been committed and will eventually be disbursed if everything goes well. And what is very interesting is that for this facility, the whole of Europe decided to act together. This has been, I think we can say, unprecedented until now. And indeed, the joint borrowing of this money allowed to raise quite a significant amount of funds. And also the disbursement of the funds was quite quick. So this has never happened in Europe, to set up such a big facility and so much money to disburse in such a small amount of time. So this was an unprecedented response, which frankly you could not see anywhere else in the world.
We can really consider it a milestone for the European Union. So
Absolutely.
implementing such a comprehensive plan across diverse member states must come with a set of challenges. What are some key challenges you have encountered in the implementation process? And how is the European Commission addressing these challenges to ensure effective utilization of the funds?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, I could talk about the challenges the whole day, but maybe the best is that I focus on the most important ones. So I said that the big value added of the Recovery and Resilience Facility is that the whole of Europe is moving together. But of course, it is not that easy, right? Because there are diverse national contexts. So also the COVID pandemic hit different member states differently. And also the size of the envelope for different member states is very different. So those which were harder hit, they receive more money compared to those who did not suffer that much, or whose economies did not suffer that much. So that means that each EU member state has its unique socioeconomic and institutional context, and the recovery and resilience plans need to match this. So this is one area which is quite difficult for those who are implementing this facility, that all 27 member states have different needs. The other big problem is that administrative capacity is sometimes lacking in member states. As we discussed, this is a huge facility. This is a lot of money to disburse, and most member states, if we want to be frank, were not ready for this in 2020, 2021. So member states needed to set up appropriate coordinating bodies who are staffed with people who know what they are doing. So this was quite a difficult exercise. In this, what the European Commission can do, of course, can advise member states what is the best way of administratively steering the implementation of the plans. And also we work basically on a daily basis with member states, helping them to implement their plans. Probably the third important challenge is that the implementation of the facility proved to be more complex than initially expected. I mean, you can imagine that this was a new framework to set up, because the framework of the RRF is very, very different from the previous, I mean, for the habitual or the usual funding, which is the cohesion funding. So this works very differently, because while in cohesion funding, money is disbursed based on invoices, the RRF is a performance-based instrument, which means that disbursement of funds is done when member states reach certain milestones and targets. So this is a very, very different logic. Member states were not used to that. So this was one difficulty. And the coexistence of the two types of instruments at the same time also created a difficulty for member states. And let's be honest, the war in Ukraine did not help either. That further complicated the difficulties already experienced by member states, and it resulted in some delays, which again had to be dealt with at the member state level. So again, in this, the monitoring and evaluation, which the Commission is also doing, is very important. So we have this evaluation mechanism to track the progress of projects and to ensure compliance with EU regulations. Then probably, and that is, I think, in Portugal is very topical, that of course, when there is so much money disbursed, it is important that transparency and accountability is ensured. So, which means that member states had to set up completely new audit and control mechanisms to make sure that everything is transparent and that the beneficiaries of the projects are accountable. And finally, what is also quite important is that the member states have national ownership, meaning that everyone in the country is on board. And for that, what is important is that member states involve as many stakeholders as possible, so social partners, the civil society, and that also everyone within the administration is on board. So this is quite important. And for this, what the Commission can do is constantly remind member states that they should strive to reach a consensus within the country to follow the plans, follow and implement the plans.
All right. And I will just link to this final thing you said to ask you, how are member states coping with these deadlines and time, let's say, commitment for delivering results, assigning money?
Yes. So, I mean, the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility is well underway. Actually, those who really want to learn a little bit more, then there is a website dedicated to this on the Commission's website, which actually tracks the implementation. It is called the RRF scoreboard, which tracks the implementation of the RRF. So you can see exactly how much money has been disbursed. You can see how many milestones and targets have been met, and so on and so on. So this is quite a good way of transparently showing where we are with the RRF. There was also not long ago, it was published at the end of February, if I am not mistaken, the midterm evaluation of the RRF, which also shows where we are with the implementation. So by the time at the end of February, basically close to 225 billion euros have been disbursed. And basically there was at the time 54 payment requests already addressed to the Commission from 24 member states. But also shows, so only 24 member states out of the 27, which means that 3 member states have not yet sent payment requests. There are more member states where the payment requests have not yet been fully assessed and no money has been disbursed for the payment request. So there is quite a heterogeneity between member states. But all in all, I would say that the implementation of the RRF is on track. But I also need to add that obviously the war in Ukraine slowed down the process, so things did not turn out as well as it was initially expected. But of course, it is never turning out as well as you expect something. So one would say that in 2021, 2022, the implementation was exactly how it was supposed to be. And then in 2023, things slowed down. Why? What happened? After the invasion of Ukraine, the, the RRF was changed because Repower EU, which is the EU's instrument to become independent of Russian fossil fuels, was added to the RRF. And that meant that in 2023, most member states added a Repower EU chapter to their recovery and resilience plan. And to negotiate this Repower EU chapter, member states had to a little bit divert resources from the implementation of the normal plan to the negotiation of the Repower EU chapter, and therefore implementation slowed down a bit in 2023. But now what we see is that it is picking up again.
Right. So there is also a huge share of flexibility from the European Commission on the projects that are chosen and how the money are distributed across the economy.
Yes and no. So how does this work? So member states negotiate, member states submit, or member state design the recovery and resilience plans. Then this is negotiated with the Commission, but then it is adopted by the Council. So basically, member states kind of sign a contract with the Council on what they are going to do. And this is, once it is adopted by the Council, unless it is changed by the Council, it is written down black and white what member states need to do. So there is some flexibility in the RRF regulation, which allows member states to renegotiate with the Council, I mean, through the help of the Commission, obviously. But it is quite clear. So, for example, you could go to the website of the RRF and check what has Slovakia committed to do. And then you can open the Council implementing decision, and it shows you exactly what Slovakia has to do in order to unlock the funds. So in that sense, once it's negotiated, there is not so much flexibility. Of course, these Council implementing decisions, they only show the skeleton of what Slovakia is doing. Slovakia is free to put the flesh on this skeleton, which was negotiated with the Council.
Okay, thank you very much. Very clear. Let's now move to Portugal, more specific. Would you like to give us like a brief outline of the situation in Portugal, where you can like just tell us what you think are the best thing or the most realized projects, or in general, how is the Portuguese recovery and resilience plan working?
Well, I mean, I think I'm a very lucky person that I can work on the Portuguese recovery and resilience plan because Portugal is actually one of the front runners of implementing the RRF. So it's not a surprise. For example, Portugal was the first country who officially submitted in 2021 the recovery and resilience plan. And Portugal, obviously, this submission was preceded by very intense negotiations. I think we negotiated 8 months with Portugal, but Portugal was very open to suggestions from the Commission. Portugal also had a quite wide-ranging stakeholder consultation before officially submitting the recovery and resilience plan, and this resulted in a very important national ownership. I mean, it's not a surprise when you go to Portugal, where you are in Portugal, if you open any newspapers, you can read at least one thing about the RRP in that newspaper. You know, I often go to Portugal. If you go to a restaurant, it is quite normal that you hear that people are talking about the RRF over lunch. So Portugal, in that sense, even the Portuguese society is very much engaged in implementing the RRP, and I think this shows. So implementation in Portugal is quite on track, and the Portuguese RRP is I'm just thinking there are so many good things I could say about the Portuguese RRP, but possibly what is most important for me is that the Portuguese RRP is very social. So over 40% of the allocation on the Portuguese RRP is spent on social measures, which is very important. It is also very much needed in Portugal. So there is a lot of funds are going into education, into health, into social protection, and this is very important in my opinion. The Portuguese RRP in a way is also a very complex RRP. Some member states opted to do it in an easier way, but since Portugal decided to give a little piece to everyone, the plan is a little bit fragmented. So we have many small investments. The Portuguese RRP also has many important reforms, which will be transforming the Portuguese economy. And some of these reforms have already been implemented. So all in all, I believe that the implementation of the RRP is an amazing chance for Portugal to transform the Portuguese economy and turn it into a more modern, more resilient economy and society.
And we could not be more proud of this from Portugal. Thank you very much. So one final question. The future scenarios, is common debt of a similar size a repeatable measure, or do you think it's a unicum in the EU policy-making framework?
Well, it's a little bit too early to say, right? But it is for sure the biggest the experience ever done at such a scale, right? So basically, now the jury is out there whether this will work or not. But we can already see from the midterm evaluation that there are quite a lot of good features of the RRF which could be used for any future funding. So what are the most important ones? What I would mention here is that the RRF, as opposed to previous EU funding, does not only include investments, but also reforms. And we have seen that including reforms actually helps in transforming economies. And so this feature is something that will probably be preserved for any future instrument. The other thing which I explained to you before is this performance-based nature of the RRF, that money is disbursed upon completion of milestones and targets. And this, again, seems to be a good way of funding, because here you actually pay for performance, for results, rather than just money spent. So this is, again, a feature which will probably stay in one way or another. The other thing is that the RRF seems to be able to disburse quite a high amount of money in a short time, which is, again, something that could be used in the future. And basically, the other thing is that through the implementation of the RRF, it is ensured that member states are doing reforms and investments which are in line with EU priorities, and that the money is spent on things that matter the most. I don't know, have you ever heard about the European semester?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So maybe those who don't know what the European semester is, the European semester is a framework which identifies every year the areas in each member state where focus should be put on. So every year, some country-specific recommendations are identified for each member state, and these country-specific recommendations basically distill the biggest problems member states face. And the RRF, when the plans were designed, member states had to come up with reforms and investments which relate to these country-specific recommendations, which show solutions to those problems. And this means that since there was this requirement when they were formulating the recovery and resilience plans, these plans are actually really spending money on what is most needed for a given member state. So possibly this is yet another feature that could be preserved for any future EU funding instrument, because this somehow makes the spending of the money the most efficient.
Yeah, for sure. One last word about Portugal. Where do you see the most urgent areas to intervene and to direct investment and facilities in Portugal?
I mean, in a way, the recovery and resilience plan as it is quite balanced in this sense. So the recovery and resilience plan directs money where it is most needed. So for me, what is most important is that Portugal implements the plan exactly as it is agreed and without any delays, which, as I told you, I don't see any problem with this. So obviously, what are the biggest areas in the RRP of Portugal that are there? So for example, Portugal is spending a lot of money on research and development, which is very important because Portugal is lacking in especially publicly financed research. The other area is housing. There is over 3 billion euros going on housing in the RRP. Of course, there is need for much more, but that is again something that Portugal is well aware of. And then it's again what I mentioned already, that the RRP is very social. So in the area of social protection, poverty is again something that requires attention from Portuguese authorities.
Well, thank you very much. And we would have 100 more questions, and we would be glad to have you here at Nova one day, maybe, whenever you have some time in Portugal. But thank you very much for your intervention and for your wise words on this very, very important milestone for everyone, I would say.
Many thanks, Alberto. It was good to chat with you.